They called me a thief, a manipulator, a gold digger who preyed on a lonely old woman. But let me tell you what they never knew. My name is Margaret Stone, and for 30 years, I cleaned the floors of the Beaumont mansion. 30 years of scrubbing marble, polishing silver, and watching a family slowly rot from the inside while one beautiful soul remained pure. Eleanor Beaumont. I first met her in 1995. I was 35 years old, recently widowed, and desperately trying to keep my head above water. The employment agency sent me to this massive estate on Riverside Drive, you know the type. Old money. The kind of house that whispers secrets through every hallway. Mrs. Beaumont answered the door herself that day. Not the butler. Not a housekeeper. Her. She was 62 then, with silver hair pulled back elegantly and eyes that actually saw you, really saw you. Not through you, like so many wealthy people do. You must be Margaret, she said, extending her hand. Not for me to shake, but to hold. Please, come in. I've made tea. I remember standing there, confused. Employers didn't make tea for the help. But Eleanor Beaumont wasn't like other employers. Over the weeks and months that followed, I learned her rhythms. She'd sit in the sunroom every morning, reading. Classical music playing softly. She never barked orders. She asked, Margaret, when you have a moment, could you? Always with that gentle smile. And we talked. Lord, how we talked. At first, just pleasantries. Then deeper things. She told me about her late husband, about the loneliness of this big house. I told her about my Danny, taken too soon by cancer. About my grown son who moved across the country for work. We became friends. I know that sounds strange to some people. The wealthy widow and her housekeeper. But that's what we were. Now, Eleanor had family. A grandson, Christopher. He was 25 when I started, already entitled and cold. Tall, handsome in that privileged way, with eyes like chips of ice. He'd visit maybe once a month, always with his hand out. Grandmother, I need $20,000 for this investment opportunity. Grandmother, Vanessa, and I want to buy a condo in Aspen. Eleanor would write the checks. Every time. And every time, after he left, I'd find her in that sunroom, staring out at the gardens with such sadness in her eyes. He never asks how I am, Margaret, she whispered once. He looks at me and sees a bank account. Nothing more. Then Christopher married Vanessa. That was 2003. Oh, Vanessa, she was a piece of work. Blonde, beautiful, and venomous. She treated me like furniture. Wouldn't even acknowledge me when she walked past. Just snapped her fingers when she wanted something. You, she'd say. Not Margaret. Just you. But it was how they treated Eleanor that broke my heart. I'd hear them in the study, arguing with her about money. Christopher's voice rising. You're sitting on millions while we're scraping by. It's not fair. Scraping by. They drove matching Range Rovers. As the years passed, Eleanor and I grew closer. I was there 5 days a week, sometimes 6. We'd have lunch together. She taught me about art, classical music, literature. I taught her how to make my grandmother's Irish stew. We watched old movies on Sunday afternoons when I'd come by on my own time, not because she paid me, but because she was lonely. And because I loved her. I know some of you understand this. When you care for someone for years, when you see them at their most vulnerable, their most human, something shifts. She became more than an employer. She became family. The family I'd lost when Danny died. Before we go any further into this, I just want to say, if you feel a connection to these stories, a small click on that like button and subscribe would mean more to me than you know. It lets me know I'm not just speaking into the void, that you're really here with me. Alright, let's continue. By 2020, Eleanor was 92. Still sharp as a tack, but her body was failing. The arthritis made it hard for her to move. She needed help with almost everything. Christopher suggested a nursing home. I was there when he brought it up. Grandmother, you need professional care. There are excellent facilities. I want to stay in my home, Eleanor said firmly. Margaret takes wonderful care of me. His jaw tightened. Margaret is a housekeeper, not a nurse. Then hire a nurse to help her, Eleanor replied. I'm not leaving this house. So she hired a part-time nurse. But I was still there, every day. Helping Eleanor dress. Reading to her when her eyes grew too tired. Holding her hand through the painful nights. Christopher's visits became even less frequent. Maybe once every 2 months. He'd stay for 20 minutes, make small talk, then leave. Vanessa stopped coming entirely. But I was there. Every single day. One evening in late September of 2024, Eleanor called me into her bedroom. She looked so small in that big bed, surrounded by pillows. But her eyes were clear. "Sit with me, dear," she said, patting the bed beside her. I sat. "Margaret, I need to tell you something." She took my hand. "I've changed my will." My stomach dropped. "Mrs. Beaumont, you don't need to." "Hush. Let me finish." She squeezed my hand. "Christopher is my blood. But you, Margaret, you've been my heart. These 30 years, you've shown me more love, more genuine care, than anyone else in my life. You stayed when everyone else left." Tears were running down my face. "I stayed because I wanted to. Because you're family to me. And you're family to me." She smiled, that beautiful gentle smile. "That's why I'm leaving everything to you. The house. The money. All of it." "No. Mrs. Beaumont, I can't." "You can, and you will. Promise me, Margaret. Promise me you'll accept it. Use it to live the life you deserve. You've sacrificed enough." I promised. Because how could I refuse her? How could I deny her this final wish? She passed away 3 weeks later, on October 19th, peacefully. In her sleep. I was the one who found her that morning, still and quiet among her silk sheets. I held her hand and cried until I had no tears left. The funeral was small. Christopher and Vanessa sat in the front row, dressed in designer black, checking their phones. I sat in the back, truly mourning the woman I'd loved like a mother. The will reading was scheduled for the following Tuesday. Christopher's lawyer, Eleanor's lawyer, Christopher, Vanessa, and me. That's all. Eleanor's attorney, Mr. Harrison, was an elderly gentleman who'd known the family for 40 years. He opened the document with shaking hands. "This is the last will and testament of Eleanor Marie Beaumont, updated September 28, 2024. Christopher leaned forward, confident. Entitled. Mr. Harrison cleared his throat. "To my grandson Christopher, I leave my grandmother's wedding ring, in hopes that it might remind him what true commitment means." Christopher frowned. "What about the rest?" "The entirety of my estate, including the house on Riverside Drive, all bank accounts, investments, and personal property, I leave to Margaret and Stone, who has been more of a family to me than blood ever was." Silence. Then Vanessa's voice, shrill with disbelief. "What?" Christopher stood up, his face turning red. "That's impossible. She manipulated her. That woman." Mr. Harrison held up a letter. "Mrs. Beaumont also left this, to be read aloud." He began reading Eleanor's words, her voice living through his. "She wrote about our 30 years together. About how I'd cared for her, listened to her, loved her. About how Christopher had only ever seen her as a source of money. About how this was her choice, made with a clear mind and a full heart." By the end, I was sobbing. Christopher was shaking with rage. "This isn't over," he hissed, pointing at me. "You think you can steal my grandmother's fortune? You're nothing but a cleaning lady. I'll destroy you." Vanessa stood beside him, her beautiful face twisted with hatred. "You manipulated a sick old woman. Everyone will know what you really are." They stormed out, and I sat there, holding Eleanor's letter, wondering what I'd just inherited. It wasn't just money. It was a war. The first attack came within 48 hours. I was still staying at the mansion, my mansion now, though it didn't feel real. I kept expecting Eleanor to call me from the sunroom asking for tea. The silence in that big house was suffocating. Wednesday morning, someone knocked on the door. Hard. Aggressive. I opened it to find a man in an expensive suit holding a briefcase. Behind him stood Christopher and Vanessa, arms crossed, faces cold. "Margaret Stone?" the man asked. "Yes?" He handed me a thick envelope. "You've been served. We're contesting the will on grounds of undue influence and mental incapacity. You're required to appear in court." My hand shook as I took the papers. Christopher stepped forward, close enough that I could smell his cologne. "Too much of it. Did you really think we'd let you get away with this?" His voice was quiet. "Dangerous. You wormed your way into my grandmother's life, isolated her from her real family, and manipulated a confused old woman into signing away my inheritance." "That's not what happened," I whispered. "Your grandmother was completely clear-minded. She made her own choice." Vanessa laughed. "Sharp, cruel, clear-minded? She was 92 years old. Anyone can see she was senile. You took advantage of her." "I loved her." "You loved her money," Christopher spat. "But you won't see a penny of it. I promise you that." They left. I stood in the doorway, shaking, holding those papers like they were made of fire. That was just the beginning. By Friday, the bank had frozen all of Eleanor's accounts pending the investigation. Every single one. The house was part of the estate, so technically I could stay there, but I couldn't access any money for utilities, food, or anything else. I had maybe $300 in my own account, that's all. Christopher's lawyers were fast. Ruthlessly fast. They filed emergency motions, requested expedited hearings, claimed I was actively trying to hide assets. None of it was true, but it didn't matter. The machine was in motion. I needed a lawyer. Desperately. I called 6 firms that week. 6. You know what they all said? The same thing. Ms. Stone, a case like this requires significant resources. Our retainer alone is $50,000. $50,000. I couldn't even pay for groceries. Finally, the court appointed me a public defender. His name was Tom Morrison. He was 60 years old, overwhelmed, carrying files for 20 other cases. Nice man. Genuinely kind. But the moment I met him, I knew. I was outgunned. Christopher had hired Palmer and Associates. 3 lawyers. The kind who wore watches that cost more than my car. They had investigators, forensic accountants, expert witnesses on retainer. Tom had a briefcase with a broken latch and coffee stains on his tie. But the legal assault was only part of it. The real destruction, that happened in the town itself. See, Christopher and Vanessa didn't just want to win in court. They wanted to destroy my reputation. Make me a pariah. Make my life so unbearable that I'd give up and walk away. It started with whispers. I'd go to the grocery store, and people would stare. Turn away when I tried to make eye contact. The cashier who'd been friendly for years suddenly couldn't meet my eyes. Then came the newspaper article. Local paper. Front page of the community section. Housekeeper inherits millions, family cries foul. The article was vicious. It painted Eleanor as a confused, vulnerable elderly woman. It painted me as a calculating manipulator who'd isolated her from her loving family. They interviewed Christopher, who played the grieving grandson perfectly. My grandmother and I were very close, he lied, wiping away tears that didn't exist. But in her final years, Margaret convinced her that we didn't care. She screened our calls, turned her against us. By the end, grandmother didn't even recognize how she'd been manipulated. Every word was poison. Every word was a lie. But people believed it. The coffee shop where I'd gotten my morning coffee for 10 years? The owner asked me not to come back. It's bad for business, he said, not looking at me. People are upset. The church where I'd attended services? Women I'd known for decades crossed the street to avoid me. My neighbor, sweet Mrs. Patterson, who I'd brought soup to when she had the flu, she stopped answering her door when I knocked. I became invisible. Worse than invisible. I became the villain in someone else's story. Vanessa was particularly creative with her campaign. She went on social media, started posting things. Pictures of Eleanor from years ago, smiling with Christopher. Captions like, my beautiful grandmother, before she was isolated from the family who loved her. Post after post, painting this picture of a devoted grandson kept from his grandmother by a greedy servant. The comments underneath were brutal. Gold digger. Elder abuse. She should be in prison. I stopped looking. But I couldn't escape it. People would shout things at me on the street. Teenagers, emboldened by what they'd read online, threw eggs at my car. My car. Not even the mansion. My beat-up Honda that I'd been driving for 15 years. Then Christopher's investigators started digging into my past. They showed up at my son's house in California, asking questions. Called my former employers. Talked to people I'd gone to school with 40 years ago. Looking for anything. Any tiny piece of dirt they could use. They found nothing. Because there was nothing to find. But that didn't stop them from implying, suggesting, planting seeds of doubt. At the preliminary hearing in early November, Christopher's lead attorney, a shark named Catherine Whitmore, stood up and addressed the judge. Your Honor, we have grave concerns about Ms. Stone's character and intentions. Our investigation has revealed a pattern of behavior suggesting calculated manipulation. What pattern? Tom asked, standing up. What evidence? Catherine smiled. Cold. Ms. Stone isolated Mrs. Beaumont from her family. Phone records show that calls from Mr. Beaumont to his grandmother decreased significantly after 2015. Because he stopped calling. I whispered urgently to Tom. Tom stood. Your Honor, correlation is not causation. If Mr. Beaumont called his grandmother less frequently, perhaps that speaks to his priorities, not Ms. Stone's influence. Furthermore, Catherine continued, ignoring him, Ms. Stone was present during the will change. Alone with Mrs. Beaumont and the attorney. Who's to say she didn't coerce? Mrs. Beaumont's attorney is a respected professional with 40 years of experience, Tom interrupted. Are you suggesting he participated in fraud? The judge held up his hand. Enough. This is a preliminary hearing. Save your arguments for trial. But I could see it in his eyes, the doubt. The question. What if they were right? After the hearing, in the courthouse hallway, Vanessa approached me. Christopher hung back, letting her do the dirty work. She got close. Too close. Her perfume was overwhelming. You know what I think, Margaret, she said softly, so only I could hear. I think you knew exactly what you were doing. All those years, playing the devoted servant, worming your way in. You saw a lonely old woman and you saw dollar signs. That's not true, I said, my voice shaking. I loved Eleanor. You loved her money. She smiled. Beautiful and terrible. But you're not going to get it. We're going to drag this out. Month after month. Hearing after hearing. We have unlimited resources, Margaret. How long can you last? How long before you run out of money, out of hope, out of fight? She leaned even closer, her voice dropping to a whisper. Just walk away. Sign a release, take nothing, and disappear. We'll make the case go away. You can go back to being nobody. That's all you ever were anyway. She walked away, her heels clicking on the marble floor. Christopher followed, not even glancing at me. I stood there, shaking, feeling the walls close in. That night, I sat alone in Eleanor's mansion, my mansion, surrounded by 30 years of memories, and I understood something terrible. They were going to win. Not because they were right. But because they had power. Money. Influence. And I had nothing. I thought about Vanessa's offer. Just walk away. Let them have it. End this nightmare. I was so tired. So completely, utterly tired. The next morning, I started packing my things. Maybe she was right. Maybe I should just disappear. I was cleaning out the small room off the kitchen, the room that had been my space during those long days caring for Eleanor. I found an old box on the top shelf of the closet, plain, wooden, locked. I didn't remember Eleanor giving it to me. Then I saw the envelope taped to the top, written in her elegant handwriting. My dearest Margaret, open only if they try to take what's yours. I knew they would. I'm sorry for what's coming. But I prepared for this. Trust me one last time. All my love, Eleanor. My hands trembled as I pulled the envelope free. Inside was a small key. And everything, absolutely everything, was about to change. I didn't open the box that morning. I know that sounds strange. You find a mysterious locked box from the woman you loved, with a note telling you to open it, and I just put it back on the shelf. But I was afraid. Afraid of hope. Hope is dangerous when you're drowning. It makes you fight when maybe you should just let go. So I pushed it aside and went to court. The formal hearings began in late November. Cold, gray days that matched the coldness in that courtroom. Christopher and Vanessa sat on one side with their team of lawyers. Polished. Confident. Powerful. I sat on the other side with Tom, who kept dropping his papers. Catherine Whitmore opened their case like she was presenting a murder trial. Your Honor, what we have here is textbook elder abuse. A vulnerable, elderly woman isolated from her family, manipulated by someone she trusted. Margaret Stone spent 30 years positioning herself, waiting, and then in the final months of Mrs. Beaumont's life, she struck. The way she said my name. Like it tasted bad in her mouth. She called their first witness. A doctor. Not Eleanor's doctor. Eleanor's doctor had passed away 2 years earlier. No, this was some neurologist they'd found who specialized in dementia and cognitive decline. He'd never met Eleanor. Never examined her. But he reviewed her medical records and testified that a woman of 92 would almost certainly have experienced significant cognitive decline. Tom objected. Your Honor, this doctor never met Mrs. Beaumont. Her actual physician documented that she was sharp and clear-minded until the end. But that physician is deceased, Catherine said smoothly. We only have his notes, which could have been influenced by Miss Stone's presence during appointments. The judge allowed the testimony. The doctor went on. And on. Using big medical words to paint Eleanor as a confused old woman who couldn't possibly have made sound decisions. I wanted to scream. To stand up and tell them about Eleanor. About how she'd done the New York Times crossword puzzle every morning. How she'd quoted Shakespeare from memory. How she'd balanced her own checkbook until the arthritis made it too painful to write. But I just sat there. Silent. Powerless. Next, they called Christopher to the stand. He was perfect. Absolutely perfect. Dressed in a dark suit. Voice trembling with emotion. He told this beautiful story about a loving grandmother who'd raised him after his parents died. About Sunday dinners and birthday celebrations. About how close they'd been. All lies. But convincing lies. When did you notice your grandmother changing? Catherine asked gently. Christopher dabbed at his eyes with a handkerchief. Around 2015. She started, pulling away. Not returning my calls as often. Making excuses when Vanessa and I wanted to visit. At first, I thought maybe she was just getting older, wanting more quiet time. But then I realized. He paused. Looked at me. The hatred in his eyes was real, even if everything else was performance. I realized Margaret was always there. Always in the background. And grandmother started saying strange things. Accusing me of only caring about money. Saying I never visited when I'd been there just the week before. Margaret was poisoning her mind against me. Objection. Tom stood up. There's no evidence. Sustained, the judge said tiredly. Mr. Beaumont, please stick to facts, not speculation. But the damage was done. You could see it in the judge's face. The doubt blooming. When Tom cross-examined Christopher, he tried. He really did. Mr. Beaumont, how often did you actually visit your grandmother in the last 5 years of her life? As often as I could. I have a demanding career. How often? Once a month? Once a week? Christopher shifted. Every few weeks. Sometimes once a month. But we spoke on the phone. How many times did you visit in 2024, the year she passed? Silence. Mr. Beaumont? I don't recall exactly. Several times. Tom pulled out phone records. According to these records, you called your grandmother exactly 4 times in 2024. You visited twice. Once in March, once in August. Christopher's jaw tightened. I was busy. I had every intention. Yet Miss Stone was there 5 days a week, sometimes 6, for 30 years. Who was really there for your grandmother? It was a good point, but Catherine was better. On redirect, she had Christopher explain how his demanding career was actually running the family's charitable foundation, a lie, but it sounded noble. How his grandmother had told him she didn't want him to visit so often because she didn't want to be a burden, another lie, but effective. Then Vanessa took the stand. Oh, Vanessa was good. She cried real tears, talked about how much she'd loved Grandma Eleanor, how heartbroken she was that they'd been kept apart in Eleanor's final years. I would call, and Margaret would say Grandma was sleeping. I'd try to visit, and Margaret would say it wasn't a good time. I thought I was respecting an old woman's need for rest. I didn't realize I was being shut out. More lies. Vanessa had never called, never tried to visit, but there was no way to prove that. The hearing stretched through December. Week after week, they called Eleanor's hairdresser, who testified that Eleanor had seemed confused sometimes. They called the gardener, who said Eleanor had repeated herself occasionally. They called a financial expert who explained how easy it would be for someone to manipulate an elderly person into changing their will. Every witness. Every piece of evidence. All pointing to the same story: Margaret Stone, the cunning predator. Eleanor Beaumont, the helpless victim. And I sat there, day after day, watching my life get torn apart. Tom tried to fight back. He called the nurse who'd helped care for Eleanor in her final months. She testified that Eleanor was sharp, clear, absolutely certain about what she wanted. Catherine destroyed her on cross-examination. Isn't it true, Ms. Chen, that Margaret Stone recommended you for this position? That she was, in effect, your employer? Well, yes, but... So you had financial incentive to support Ms. Stone's version of events? The nurse left the stand in tears. Tom called Mr. Harrison, Eleanor's attorney, who drafted the will. He testified that Eleanor had been completely competent, that she'd made her wishes clear, that he'd even questioned her repeatedly to ensure she understood what she was doing. Mrs. Beaumont told me, in no uncertain terms, that Christopher had shown himself to care only about money. That Margaret had been the daughter she never had. That this was her choice, made freely. It was powerful testimony. For a moment, I felt hope rising in my chest. Then Catherine stood up for cross-examination. Mr. Harrison, you've been the Beaumont family attorney for 40 years, correct? Yes. And during that time, how many times did you meet with Mrs. Beaumont alone? I'm not sure. Many times. But this final will change. Margaret Stone was present during that meeting, wasn't she? Yes, but... In fact, Miss Stone drove Mrs. Beaumont to your office, didn't she? And waited in the lobby? Yes. So Miss Stone knew exactly when and where this meeting was taking place. She arranged it. She was in control of the situation. Mrs. Beaumont requested. No further questions. Again, Catherine had twisted the truth just enough, making it seem like I'd orchestrated everything, when really Eleanor had asked me to drive her because she could no longer drive herself. But facts didn't matter anymore. Only perception. The worst day came in mid-December. Catherine presented their final piece of evidence. A recording. Your Honor, we've obtained a recording from Mrs. Beaumont's medical alert system. These devices record brief clips when activated. This is from September 10, 2024. They played it. Eleanor's voice, frail and shaky. Margaret, I don't know what to do. Christopher was here. He was so angry. Maybe I should just give him what he wants. I'm so tired of fighting. My voice responded. Mrs. Beaumont, you don't have to give him anything. This is your decision. Your money. Remember what we talked about? Eleanor's voice, uncertain. Yes, but I don't want to cause trouble. You're not causing trouble. You're taking control of your life. The recording ended. The courtroom was silent. Catherine turned to the judge. Your Honor, I think we clearly hear Ms. Stone coaching a confused, exhausted elderly woman, pushing her own agenda. I wanted to scream. That conversation. Eleanor had called me that day, upset after Christopher had berated her for refusing to loan him money for another failed business venture. I'd comforted her. Reminded her that she didn't owe him anything. That was support, not manipulation. But listening to it played back, cut and edited, it sounded like I was controlling her. Tom tried to explain the context. But he didn't have the full story. I hadn't told him everything because I hadn't thought it mattered. After that day, I saw it in the judge's eyes. He believed them. The judge ordered a recess until after the new year. We'd reconvene in January for closing arguments. I left the courthouse that day knowing I'd lost. It was just a matter of time. Christmas came and went. I spent it alone in that big, empty house. No tree. No decorations. No point. On New Year's Eve, I sat in Eleanor's sunroom, the same room where we'd shared so many conversations, and I made a decision. I was done fighting. Vanessa was right. I was nobody. I'd always been nobody. I'd been foolish to think I deserved anything more. I'd call Catherine Whitmore in the morning, sign whatever papers they wanted, walk away. They could have it all. At least the nightmare would be over. I went to my room off the kitchen to start packing. I'd go back to my tiny apartment. Find another cleaning job. Disappear into the life I should have never left. That's when I saw it. The wooden box. Still sitting on the shelf where I'd left it 6 weeks earlier. Eleanor's note was still attached. Open only if they try to take what's yours. I picked it up, held it in my hands. I'm sorry, Eleanor, I whispered. I tried. I really tried. But they're too strong. I should have put it back, should have walked away. But something made me pick up that small key. Something made me slide it into the lock. The box opened. Inside, neatly organized, were dozens of USB drives. Each one labeled in Eleanor's handwriting. Christopher, March 2018. Christopher and Vanessa, July 2020. Theft, December 2022. Audio, September 2024. Beneath the USB drives, a stack of leather-bound journals. Years' worth. And a letter. Sealed. Addressed to me. My hand shook as I opened it. My dearest Margaret, it began. If you're reading this, then Christopher has done exactly what I knew he would do. He's challenged the will. He's tried to paint me as a confused old fool and you as a villain. I'm so sorry, my dear friend. But I prepared for this. I've been preparing for years. Everything you need is in this box. The truth. Recorded, documented, undeniable. Show them who Christopher and Vanessa really are. Show them what I really wanted. Fight, Margaret. Fight like I know you can. Make them see. All my love, always, Eleanor. I pulled out the first USB drive, plugged it into my laptop, pressed play. The video showed Eleanor's bedroom. The camera must have been hidden somewhere high, maybe in the bookshelf. The date stamp read March 14, 2018. Christopher burst into the room. Eleanor was in bed, reading. Grandmother, we need to talk. Now. Christopher, it's late. I don't care. I need $50,000. The business deal I told you about, it's happening faster than expected. You said it was $20,000 last week. The situation changed. I need 50. Tonight. Eleanor's voice was firm. No, Christopher. I've given you over $200,000 in the past 3 years. Each time, you promise it's an investment. But nothing ever comes back. I'm not giving you any more. His face, the rage on his face. You selfish old woman, he hissed. You're sitting on millions. Millions. While I'm out here trying to make something of myself. You're gambling it away, Eleanor said quietly. I know about the debts, Christopher. I know about the casino in Atlantic City. That's none of your business. It is when you're asking me to fund your addiction. He grabbed the bedpost. If you don't give me this money, I'm done. Do you hear me? Done. You'll never see me again. Then I suppose I won't see you again, Eleanor said, her voice breaking. I love you, Christopher. But I won't enable you to destroy yourself. He stormed out. The video continued. Eleanor, alone in her bed, crying softly. He didn't mean it, she whispered to herself. He's just upset. He didn't mean it. But he had meant it. I checked the dates. He didn't visit again for 4 months. I sat there, staring at the screen, and for the first time in weeks, I felt something other than despair. I felt rage. Eleanor had been collecting evidence. 4 years. She'd known what Christopher was. She'd known what was coming. And she'd given me the weapons to fight back. I spent the entire night going through that box. Video after video. Audio recording after audio recording. Journal entry after journal entry. And by morning, I understood. This wasn't just evidence. This was a reckoning. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't. I sat at Eleanor's kitchen table, my kitchen table, and I went through everything. Every single piece of evidence she'd left me. Years and years of carefully documented truth. The USB drives were organized by date and category. Eleanor had been meticulous. She'd started recording in 2015, the exact year Christopher claimed I'd begun isolating her. But the recordings told a different story. I clicked on the next video. June 2016. The date stamp showed early evening. The hidden camera captured Eleanor's living room. She sat in her favorite chair, reading. The front door opened. Christopher and Vanessa walked in without knocking. Grandmother, Christopher said, barely looking at her. We need to talk about money. Hello to you too, dear, Eleanor said softly. Would you like some tea? We don't have time for tea. Vanessa's voice was sharp. Christopher and I are buying a beach house in the Hamptons. We need you to co-sign the mortgage. Eleanor put down her book. A beach house? Christopher, didn't you just ask me for $30,000 last month for your business? That's different. This is an investment property. You want me to guarantee a mortgage for how much? $1.2 million, Vanessa said, examining her nails. It's actually a steal for the area. No, Eleanor said firmly. I'm sorry, but no. That's an enormous financial obligation. Christopher's face flushed. You have more than enough money. That's not the point. You're 36 years old, Christopher. You need to build your own financial stability, not rely on. Not rely on you, he interrupted. You mean not rely on my inheritance? The money that should already be mine? The venom in his voice made my skin crawl. The money that's yours when I die, Eleanor corrected quietly. Until then, it's mine to manage. Vanessa stood up. You know what? Forget it. Come on, Christopher. We'll ask someone who actually cares about family. They left without saying goodbye. No hug. No kiss on the cheek. Nothing. The camera captured Eleanor sitting alone, her hands shaking as she picked up her book again. I wiped tears from my face and opened another file. This one was audio only. September 2019. I recognized the voices immediately. Christopher and Vanessa, but Eleanor wasn't speaking. She must have been recording secretly. I'm telling you, she's got to be sitting on at least 10 million, Christopher said. Probably more. And she's spending it on what? That decrepit house? That cleaning lady? Vanessa's laugh was bitter. We could be living in Manhattan. We could be in the Hamptons full time. Instead, we're stuck in that mediocre condo while she hoards everything. When she dies isn't soon enough. She could live another 10 years. I'm not waiting that long, Christopher. What do you suggest? There are facilities. Nice ones. We move her into assisted living, sell the house, and we manage her assets. For her own good, of course. Christopher was quiet for a moment. She'd never agree. Then we get her declared incompetent. My cousin's a lawyer. He says it's not that hard with someone her age. A few doctor's evaluations, some testimony about confusion. She's not confused. But we could make it look like she is. Keep her isolated. Control who she sees. Document every little mistake. Everyone forgets things at that age. My stomach turned. What about Margaret? Christopher asked. Fire her. First thing. She's too loyal to grandmother. She'd never go along with it. Grandmother would be furious. Vanessa's voice turned cold. Grandmother doesn't get a vote. Not if she's been declared incompetent. The recording ended. I sat back, my heart pounding. They'd planned this. Years ago. They'd wanted to take control of Eleanor's life, her money, everything. The only reason they hadn't succeeded was because Eleanor had stopped seeing them, had pulled away, had protected herself, and they'd blamed me for it. I kept going through the files. There were dozens more. Videos of Christopher stealing from Eleanor. I watched him pocket a diamond brooch from her jewelry box when he thought she was napping. Another video showed Vanessa taking a painting off the wall and carrying it out to their car. Just borrowing it, she'd said when Eleanor caught her. For our apartment. You never even look at it. Audio recordings of phone conversations. Christopher calling Eleanor, asking for money. His voice sweet at first, then angry when she refused, then cruel. You're a selfish old hag, you know that? I'm your only family, and you treat me like garbage. Christopher, please don't. Don't what? Tell you the truth? You'd rather spend money on that cleaning lady than your own grandson. It's pathetic. The call ended with him hanging up on her. Eleanor's journals were worse in some ways. More personal. More painful. I opened the one from 2020, her final year. March 4th. Christopher called again today. He needs money for another investment opportunity. I said no. He called me selfish. Perhaps I am. Perhaps I should just give him what he wants and buy some peace. But Margaret reminds me that peace bought with money isn't real peace. She's right. She's always right about these things. May 16th. I hired a private investigator to look into Christopher's finances. I needed to know. The report came back today. He's $300,000 in debt. Gambling, failed business ventures, poor investments. If I give him money, it will disappear into that black hole. How did I fail him so badly? Where did I go wrong? July 23rd. I've made my decision. I'm leaving everything to Margaret. She'll think I'm crazy. She'll say no. But I'm going to make her promise to accept it. She's been a daughter to me. More than a daughter. She's been my friend. My true friend. Christopher sees me as an ATM. Vanessa sees me as an obstacle. But Margaret, she sees me. Really sees me. That's worth more than blood. I was crying openly now, tears dripping onto the pages. But I kept reading. September 10th. Christopher came by today. He was furious. He'd heard somehow that I'd changed my will. I don't know how, maybe Mr. Harrison's secretary mentioned something. He screamed at me. Actually screamed. Said I was betraying the family. That Margaret had poisoned my mind. That I was a foolish old woman being manipulated. It hurt so much. I called Margaret after he left. She comforted me. Reminded me that I'm allowed to make my own choices. That I don't owe anyone anything just because we share blood. September 28th. I met with Mr. Harrison today. Margaret drove me. The will is final now. Everything to her. I feel peaceful. Like I've finally done something right. I know what's coming. I know Christopher will fight this. That's why I've been recording everything. Saving everything. If he challenges the will, Margaret will have ammunition. She'll have the truth. I just hope it's enough. The last entry was dated October 16th, 3 days before she died. I'm very tired now. The pain is getting worse, even with the medication. But I'm not afraid. I've lived a full life. And in these last years, I've known real love. Real friendship. Margaret thinks I saved her when I hired her 30 years ago. But the truth is, she saved me. From loneliness. From bitterness. From becoming the kind of person who values money over humanity. I'm leaving her everything because she deserves it. Because she earned it through kindness. And because I know she'll use it to do good in this world. I love you, my dear friend. Even if I never said it enough. I closed the journal and pressed my hands to my face, sobbing. Then I pulled myself together. Because Eleanor had given me a gift. Not the money. Not the house. But this. The truth. The evidence. The ammunition to fight back. But I couldn't do this alone. Tom Morrison was a good man, but he was overwhelmed. I needed someone who could understand what we were dealing with. Someone who specialized in this kind of case. I started searching online. Elder abuse attorneys. Estate litigation specialists. I made a list. The next morning, January 2nd, I started calling. Most wouldn't even take my call. A few listened politely, then explained they were too busy or the case was too complicated. But the seventh call was different. Stone case? The Beaumont estate? The woman's voice was sharp. Interested. This is the one where the family's claiming undue influence? Yes, I said. But I have evidence. Substantial evidence. What kind of evidence? Videos. Audio recordings. Journals. Years' worth. Showing the grandson's abuse, his theft, his plans to have Mrs. Beaumont declared incompetent. All of it documented by Mrs. Beaumont herself. Silence on the other end. Then, I'm listening. Her name was Rachel Chen. 50 years old. Former prosecutor turned private attorney specializing in elder abuse and estate cases. She'd taken down corrupt guardians, exposed family exploitation rings, won landmark cases. She was exactly what I needed. We met that afternoon at the mansion. I showed her everything. Every video. Every audio file. Every journal entry. She watched in silence, her expression unreadable. When I finished, she sat back and looked at me. Miss Stone, do you understand what you have here? Evidence? No. A nuclear bomb. She leaned forward. This isn't just evidence that Mrs. Beaumont was competent. This is evidence of elder abuse. Financial exploitation. Theft. Conspiracy. With this, we don't just defend, we attack. Hope bloomed in my chest for the first time in months. Can we win? Win? We can destroy them. She smiled. Fierce. But I need to be honest with you. My retainer is expensive. $50,000. My heart sank. I don't have that. The estate is frozen. I have maybe $200 in my account. Rachel was quiet for a moment. Then she said something I'll never forget. I'll take the case pro bono. With the understanding that when we win, and we will win, you'll donate an equivalent amount to my foundation for elder abuse prevention. Why would you do that? She looked at the video still frozen on my laptop screen. Eleanor's face. Alone. Crying after Christopher left. Because I'm tired of seeing good people destroyed by greedy relatives. Because your friend Eleanor deserved better. And because I'm going to enjoy taking Christopher Beaumont apart piece by piece. We shook hands. Over the next week, Rachel built our strategy. She brought in a forensic accountant to trace Christopher's debts and gambling. She contacted the companies where Vanessa had sold Eleanor's stolen jewelry and art. She had the videos and audio analyzed to verify authenticity. She was building a case. Not just to defend me, but to expose them. We're not going to wait for closing arguments, she told me. We're filing a counterclaim. Elder abuse. Theft. Fraud. We're going to flip this entire case on its head. Will the judge allow it? He'll have to. We have evidence of crimes. The court can't ignore that. On January 15th, we went back to court. Catherine Whitmore stood up, ready to begin her closing arguments. Ready to seal my fate. Rachel stood up first. Your Honor, before we proceed, the defense would like to submit new evidence and file a counterclaim against Christopher Beaumont and Vanessa Beaumont for elder abuse, financial exploitation, and theft. The courtroom went silent. Catherine's face went white. Your Honor, this is highly irregular. We're in the middle of. We have video and audio evidence, Rachel continued, recorded by Eleanor Beaumont herself, documenting years of abuse and exploitation by her grandson. Evidence that was specifically left to Ms. Stone to use in the event the will was challenged. Christopher stood up. This is ridiculous. What evidence? Rachel smiled. I'm glad you asked. She walked to the laptop set up on the defense table, connected it to the courtroom's display screen. Your Honor, with your permission, I'd like to play a selection of recordings made by Mrs. Eleanor Beaumont between 2015 and 2024. The judge leaned forward. Permission granted. Rachel pressed play. The first video filled the screen. Christopher, bursting into Eleanor's bedroom, demanding $50,000. His rage. His cruelty. Eleanor crying alone. Catherine tried to object. Your Honor, we don't know the context. The context is clear, Rachel said. A grandson verbally abusing his elderly grandmother because she refused to fund his gambling addiction. She played another video. Christopher stealing the brooch. Another. Vanessa taking the painting. The audio recording. Christopher and Vanessa planning to have Eleanor declared incompetent so they could control her assets. With each piece of evidence, Christopher and Vanessa sank lower in their seats. The courtroom was absolutely silent except for Eleanor's voice, strong, clear, documenting everything. Finally, Rachel played the recording that would end it all. September 24, 2024. Just days before Eleanor finalized her will. Christopher's voice caught on Eleanor's medical alert system. He'd come to visit. The last time he ever saw her. You changed your will. Someone told me you changed your will. Eleanor's voice, tired but firm. Yes, Christopher. I did. You're leaving everything to that cleaning woman? Are you insane? I'm leaving everything to someone who loves me. Someone who's been here. Someone who cares whether I live or die. I care. You care about my money. You always have. That's all I've ever been to you. Christopher's voice dropped. Cold. Final. You know what, grandmother? You're right. I do care about the money. Because it's mine. It should have been mine years ago. But you're too selfish to die. The courtroom gasped. You're a bitter, lonely old hag, he continued, and I can't wait for this to be over. Once you're gone, I'm going to contest whatever joke of a will you've written. I'm going to prove you're senile. And I'm going to get what's rightfully mine. The cleaning lady won't see a penny. Then I suppose we have nothing more to say to each other, Eleanor whispered. I suppose not. I'll see you at your funeral. If I bother to come. The recording ended. The silence in that courtroom was deafening. I watched Christopher's face. All the color had drained from it. Vanessa was crying. Actual tears this time. But not tears of sadness. Tears of fear. Rachel turned to the judge. Your Honor, Eleanor Beaumont wasn't a confused old woman manipulated by a caregiver. She was a sharp, intelligent person who documented years of abuse by her grandson, who protected herself the only way she could, by cutting him out of her will and ensuring that someone who actually loved her would benefit from her life's work. Miss Stone didn't manipulate Mrs. Beaumont. She saved her. The judge looked at Christopher. Mr. Beaumont, do you have anything to say? Christopher's lawyer whispered frantically to him. But what could he say? His own words had condemned him. No, Your Honor, he finally said, his voice barely audible. We'll recess for 24 hours, the judge said. And reconvene tomorrow for my ruling. But I will say this. I've been on the bench for 30 years, and I have never seen evidence quite this damning. Court is adjourned. Rachel and I walked out of that courtroom together. For the first time in months, I could breathe. What happens now? I asked. Now? Rachel smiled. Now we wait for the judge to rule in our favor. And then we press criminal charges. Christopher Beaumont stole from his grandmother. He abused her. He committed fraud. He's going to face consequences. That night, I sat in Eleanor's sunroom with her journals, and I whispered to her. Thank you. Thank you for seeing this coming. Thank you for protecting me. Thank you for giving me the weapons to fight. The next day, we'd find out if those weapons had been enough. I didn't sleep that night either. How could I? Everything, absolutely everything, came down to the next day. I sat in Eleanor's sunroom as the sun rose over the gardens she'd loved so much, and I thought about the journey. 30 years of friendship. Months of torture. And now, finally, the moment of truth. Rachel arrived at 8 in the morning. We had to be at the courthouse by 9. How are you feeling? She asked. Terrified. Hopeful. I don't know. She squeezed my hand. Whatever happens today, you fought. Eleanor would be proud. We drove to the courthouse in silence. The building looked different somehow. Less threatening. Or maybe I was just different. Christopher and Vanessa were already there, sitting with Catherine Whitmore. They looked smaller. Defeated. Christopher wouldn't meet my eyes. Vanessa stared at the floor. The bailiff called us in. All rise. The Honorable Judge William Hartley presiding. Judge Hartley entered and sat down. He looked tired. But his eyes were clear and sharp as he surveyed the courtroom. Please be seated. He opened a folder in front of him. I've spent considerable time reviewing the evidence presented in this case. All of it. And I'm prepared to issue my ruling. My heart hammered in my chest. This case came before me as a will contest. Christopher Beaumont claiming that his grandmother, Eleanor Beaumont, lacked the mental capacity to change her will, and that she was unduly influenced by the respondent, Margaret Stone. On the surface, it seemed like a straightforward dispute. An elderly woman. A devoted grandson. A long-time employee who inherited everything. He paused. But the evidence presented yesterday revealed something far more troubling. This was never about an old woman's confusion. This was about a pattern of abuse, exploitation, and betrayal that lasted for years. Christopher shifted in his seat. The videos and audio recordings made by Mrs. Beaumont herself paint a clear picture. A picture of a woman who was sharp, aware, and deeply hurt by her grandson's treatment. A woman who documented everything because she knew exactly what would happen after her death. Judge Hartley looked directly at Christopher. Mr. Beaumont, I listened to your testimony. You portrayed yourself as a loving grandson kept from his grandmother by a manipulative employee. But your own words, recorded by Mrs. Beaumont, tell a different story. A story of a man who saw his grandmother as nothing more than a source of money, who verbally abused her, who stole from her, who planned to have her declared incompetent to gain control of her assets. Your Honor, I can explain. Christopher started. You will remain silent, the judge said firmly. I listened to you call your grandmother a bitter, lonely old hag. I listened to you say you couldn't wait for her to die. I watched you steal from her home. These are not the actions of a devoted grandson. These are the actions of someone committing elder abuse. Vanessa was crying quietly beside Christopher. Ms. Stone, on the other hand, was exactly what she claimed to be. A friend. A companion. Someone who cared for Mrs. Beaumont without expectation of reward. The evidence shows that you were present because Mrs. Beaumont wanted you there. That you supported her decisions without manipulating them. That you loved her. Tears streamed down my face. Mrs. Beaumont's will was not the product of confusion or manipulation. It was the product of a clear-minded woman making a deliberate choice about who deserved her legacy. And she chose the person who had shown her kindness, loyalty, and genuine love. Judge Hartley closed the folder. It is the ruling of this court that Eleanor Beaumont possessed full testamentary capacity when she executed her will on September 28, 2024. There is no evidence of undue influence. The will is valid and shall be executed as written. Margaret Stone is the rightful heir to the Beaumont estate. I couldn't breathe. Rachel grabbed my hand and squeezed. Furthermore, the judge continued, I am referring this matter to the District Attorney's Office for criminal investigation. The evidence presented suggests multiple crimes including theft, elder abuse, and conspiracy. Mr. Beaumont, Mrs. Beaumont, you should expect to hear from law enforcement. Christopher stood up abruptly. This is insane. You can't. Sit down, Mr. Beaumont. I can, and I have. This court is adjourned. The gavel came down. It was over. Rachel turned to me, grinning. We won. Margaret, we won everything. I couldn't speak. I just nodded, tears flowing freely. Catherine Whitmore gathered her papers quickly, avoiding eye contact. Christopher and Vanessa rushed toward the exit, but reporters were already waiting in the hallway. I could hear the questions. Mr. Beaumont, did you abuse your grandmother? Is it true you stole from her? Do you have any comment on the criminal investigation? They pushed through without answering. Rachel and I stayed in the courtroom for a few minutes, letting the chaos die down. What happens now? I asked. Now the estate gets unfrozen. You'll have access to everything within a few days. And the criminal case, that's out of our hands. The district attorney will decide whether to prosecute. Will they? Rachel smiled grimly. With evidence like we have? Absolutely. We left through a side entrance to avoid the media. Rachel drove me back to the mansion, my mansion, and we sat in Eleanor's sunroom one last time as attorney and client. What will you do with it all? Rachel asked. The money, the house? I'd been thinking about that question for months. Eleanor left me instructions in one of her letters. She wanted me to live here as long as I wanted, but she also wanted the money to do good. She suggested a foundation. Something to help other elderly people who might be vulnerable to the kind of abuse she documented. Rachel nodded slowly. The Eleanor Beaumont Foundation for Elder Protection. Yes. Exactly that. I looked around the sunroom. And I think I'll turn part of the house into offices for it. Keep it alive. Keep her memory alive in a way that actually matters. She'd love that. I know. Rachel left a few hours later. I was alone in the house again. But this time, the silence felt different. Peaceful. I walked through the rooms, touching Eleanor's things. Her books. Her paintings. Her piano that no one had played in years. This was mine now. Not because I'd manipulated anyone. Not because I'd schemed. But because I'd been a friend when friendship was needed. Because I'd loved someone who needed love. The criminal case moved forward quickly. Within 2 weeks, Christopher and Vanessa were both arrested. The charges were extensive. Grand theft. Elder abuse. Conspiracy to commit fraud. Christopher faced additional charges for the tax fraud Eleanor had documented. The trial lasted 3 months. I attended every day of it. Christopher's lawyers tried to claim the recordings were taken out of context. That he'd been under stress. That he'd said things he didn't mean. But you can't explain away your own voice saying you can't wait for your grandmother to die. The jury deliberated for 4 hours. Guilty on all counts. Christopher was sentenced to 6 years in federal prison. Vanessa got 3 years. They were also ordered to pay restitution, not to me, but to a fund for elder abuse victims. All the stolen jewelry, the paintings, the money, it was recovered and became part of Eleanor's estate. I watched them being led away in handcuffs and felt nothing. No satisfaction. No vindication. Just sadness. Sadness that it had come to this. That greed had destroyed what could have been a family. Over the next year, I worked with Rachel to establish the Eleanor Beaumont Foundation. We hired staff, set up programs, created a legal defense fund for elderly people facing financial exploitation from family members. We offered free counseling, free legal representation, education programs about elder rights and estate planning. The foundation grew quickly. Within 6 months, we'd helped over 200 people. Some of them were being stolen from by their children. Some were being pressured to change their wills. Some were just lonely and vulnerable, looking for guidance. Each one of them got Eleanor's story. Each one of them learned that they had rights. That they deserved respect. That blood relation didn't give anyone the right to abuse or exploit them. I kept a small apartment in the mansion for myself. Simple. Comfortable. Eleanor's old room, actually. It felt right. The rest of the house became offices, meeting rooms, and a community center for seniors. The gardens Eleanor had loved so much became a place where elderly people could come and sit, read, talk, be seen. I hired a staff of caregivers and social workers. People who understood what it meant to truly care for someone. To see them as human beings, not burdens. And in the main hall, we hung a portrait of Eleanor, painted from a photograph taken in the sunroom. She's smiling in it. That gentle, knowing smile. Beneath it, a plaque reads, Eleanor Marie Beaumont. Friend. Protector. Founder. She knew that love is stronger than blood, and kindness is the only inheritance that truly matters. I visit her grave every Sunday. Fresh flowers every time. And I talk to her. Tell her about the foundation. About the people we've helped. About how her story is changing lives. We're doing it, Eleanor, I whisper. We're making a difference. Just like you wanted. Sometimes I think about Christopher. About whether he understands now what he lost. Not the money, but the chance to know an extraordinary woman. The chance to be loved by someone remarkable. He traded that for greed. And he'll live with that choice for the rest of his life. As for me, I'm 66 years old now. I live in a mansion I never dreamed of owning. I run a foundation that's helped thousands of people. I'm surrounded by staff who've become friends, and elderly visitors who've become family. But more than any of that, I kept my promise to Eleanor. I fought. I won. And I'm using everything she gave me to honor her memory and protect people just like her. People told me I was a gold digger. A manipulator. A thief who stole an old woman's fortune. But here's what I really am. I'm a friend who was there when it mattered. Who loved without expecting anything in return. Who fought for justice when it would have been easier to walk away. And I'm proof that sometimes, just sometimes, the good people win. Not because they're ruthless. Not because they're powerful. But because they're kind. Because they're true. And because somewhere, someone saw that kindness and chose to reward it. Eleanor Beaumont saw me. Really saw me. And that changed everything. You know, I've told you a lot of stories in my time. Stories of betrayal and revenge. Of justice and injustice. But this one is special to me. Because it reminds us that legacy isn't about blood. It's about love. It's about who shows up. Who stays? Who cares when no one's watching? Eleanor could have given her money to Christopher. He was family, after all. That's what people expected. But she gave it to someone who earned it through decades of friendship. And in doing so, she created something far more valuable than wealth. She created a foundation that will protect vulnerable people for generations. That's a real legacy. So if you take anything from Margaret's story, let it be this. Treat people with kindness, especially those who society tells you don't matter. The housekeeper. The nurse. The caregiver. The person who shows up every day without fanfare. Because they see everything. They know everything. And sometimes, they inherit everything. Not because they schemed for it. But because they earned it with love. Thank you for walking this difficult road with me to the very end. If this story resonated with you, you can support our community by sending a super thanks. It helps me continue to bring these important stories to light. On the screen now are 2 more stories that I know will touch your soul. I'll see you in the next one. Stay strong.